Hello, everybody, and welcome to Iowa Ideas 2024. We are so excited to be here today for the economics of the arts. Before we dive in, I just want to take care of some business up front. My name is Keegan Coletta Huckfeld. By day, I am the events director for the Ingrid Theater in Iowa City, and I'm so happy to be moderating this panel today with these amazing guests that can give us some insight on this wonderful topic. So let's dive into the topic at hand. What are successful art councils doing that others can model? How can data support pathways to support and build Iowa's reputation as a great place to build local, regional, national, and international artists? That's a hefty topic, but thankfully we have some pretty amazing people to guide us through it today and answer your questions. On that note, if you do have any questions for our panelists today, please feel free to throw them into the chat or through Huvo. They'll make sure it gets to me and we'll have time for those at the end. I do want to thank our sponsor today, ITC Midwest, who's the conference presenting sponsor for Iowa Ideas 2024, making this all possible. We are recording this session today and closed captioning access is available. And yeah, I think that's it. So let's dive in. First question here. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. I got to introduce y'all. Our first panelist today is Sally Dix, president of Bravo Greater Des Moines, a nonprofit organization that leverages community resources to maximize the impacts of arts, culture, and heritage to advance regional priorities. In addition to her work locally in support of the arts, Dix also has served on grant panels for the Iowa Arts Council, Main Street, Iowa, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Since 2017, she has also served as the at-large member for the Americans for the Arts United States Urban Arts Federation, an alliance of the chief executives of local arts agencies in the nation's 60 largest cities. Welcome, Sally. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Keegan.
Our next panelist is Julie Stowe, Executive Director of the Cedar Rapids Tourism Office for over 30 years experience in the field of retail, economic development, tourism, and hospitality. A native Californian, she found her way to Iowa in her role as Human Resources Director at Nordstrom for the opening of the Cedar Rapids Fulfillment Center. Getting started with my morning here. Her enthusiasm for the community led her to the Chamber of Commerce Economic Alliance, where she provided support to local businesses. She now uses her passion for the community to drive economic impact by attracting visitors and events to Cedar Rapids. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you.
And finally, Julia Franklin is the executive director of Mainframe Studios in downtown Des Moines. She is an accomplished artist, leader, professor, and founder of multiple community arts programs and has more than 2 decades of experience around creative sector advocacy, nonprofit management, and community program and funding development. Thanks so much for joining us, Julia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I do want to make sure all three of you get a chance to share a little bit more about yourself. I think we'll find some time as we're going through the questions today, but let's hop in here. Julie, I'm going to throw the first question to you to start us off. Why are we here? Why are art councils necessary in our communities?
Gosh, that's a big question. And I love it because I believe the arts are so important too. And I'm going to be coming at it from a tourism lens, but without those organizations and without the arts, we're not able to give experiences to visitors. And when visitors are coming from outside the community, we're needing to create memories and experiences for locals and their families, creating a reason for visitors to come back. All of those things. So it's imperative to have those organizations showcasing our community and our local arts community to outsiders.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's so important, right, when we're thinking about how we attract visitors into our communities. Sally, when you're thinking about art councils, art alliances, or art collectives, which we all have represented here, right? In your community, what comes to the top of your mind and how do they benefit the community?
Yeah, so I think Bravo considers itself a regional arts council or a local arts agency. And when we think about organizations like Bravo, there are hundreds, maybe thousands all across the country. And I really sort of think of them as the center of community life. we're creating and enabling spaces where people can feel included and seen and where they can express themselves and hopefully feel part of something greater in their communities. I think it's also important to talk about them, the local arts agencies, as a tremendous economic engine. I know that in Iowa, my organization, Bravo, invests funds that we receive from 17 local communities, and we invest about 4 times in central Iowa what the Iowa Arts Council invests in the entire state of Iowa. So there's a tremendous amount of dollars that are going out through these locals. In my work with the Urban Arts Coalition, as you mentioned, it's a national organization that I'm a part of with other leaders like me who do this work in large cities. We just had like a group of 20 of us together in July, and sum totaled our annual operating budgets, and it exceeded $200 million, which is more than the National Endowment for the Arts has for an annual operating budget. And that was only 20 of these organizations. So I just think it's really, local arts agencies are kind of where policy becomes reality, and they become critical partners in advancing the cultural community. I think it's interesting and worth pointing out that there actually is no definition of what a local arts agency is or what an arts council is. There are definitely similarities. There's often advocacy, there's grant making, convening is generally part of the mix. But there's also a lot of differences. Some arts organizations like Bravo, they actually do and produce programming, which we don't, or manage venues or public art programs. So there's quite a lot of variability in what that means. And I think it's, you know, there are different operating models. Bravo is a 501c. There are some that are agencies of local government. There are some that are appointed commissions. So I just think the question is, as Julie said, really big, and there's quite a lot of variability too.
Yeah, I want to push back there just a second, Sally, on that question to go, it is so wide. Clearly, we know there's so many paths we can go forward with. As we look at our individual communities in our great state to figure out what the best option is, how do you recommend that? What paths have you seen to determine which option is the best option?
Well, I think the answer to that is, of course, that there isn't a best option. I think it's right there in the name, Keegan. They're local arts agencies. They are built to sustain and support a local community. So you really have to be responsive to what the needs are in the place that you are serving, and make sure that you're setting something up. One of the things that I think is great about Bravo is we don't compete with the organizations we were formed to support. That was really an intentional model and part of our structure. So we don't run programs and we don't do fundraising. We're here ultimately as kind of a, you know, pass through in its simplest sense. But what are the unique roles that a local arts agency could play for your community? What are the gaps? Why do you think you need one? What is not being done? What is not being served? And how could a local arts agency advance that work in a unique way that's complementary, not competitive?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Julia, I did not forget you. Our next question is for you. First off, what are successful arts advocacy organizations currently doing from your perspective? And also, since you're joining us from Des Moines, where Bravo is such a part that Sally's been talking about, I'm curious how you had to that last conversation too, about choosing the best for your specific community.
Well, it's interesting. For those of you that may not know, Mainframe Studios is the largest creative workspace in the nation. We have 181 separate studios for artists. We are a nonprofit, so we greatly benefit from Bravo's operating support. And what's interesting is when you think about those 181 studios, those are essentially 181 small businesses. But in fact, we have over 220 artists and nonprofits sharing that space within our building. And it's wild when you think about all of those people as independent small business owners and just the economics behind that. Mainframe is incredibly, we just benefit so much from what Bravo does. So we are doing the day-to-day work. We are bringing people in. We are kind of the boots on the ground in terms of tourism. We are attracting new visitors. We're attracting new clients. Artists are working on that. We are working to advocate for them. And Bravo as a whole is kind of this beautiful place, and Sally represents all of the over 95 arts and culture nonprofits in the greater Des Moines region. And so she is able to get out and speak with people. She's able to have seats at the table while we're busy doing the day-to-day work, and taking care of buildings and people and bringing in visitors and putting up art exhibitions. And so I think that's what's critical. Art councils, art agencies are kind of the mouthpiece for the rest of us, and have more flexibility than we might in our daily schedules to really advocate for us. And they're talking about policy. They're talking about supporting artists and nonprofits financially. They are also supporting us with their time. So they're coming to events that we host to really understand the work that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And understanding that artists are people and small businesses just like everybody else. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective. I think it's really important to understanding why we're here today. Sally, you already dove into some of the economic portions of why public funding is so important, but I'd like to dig a little deeper into why the arts play such a key economic role in each of our individual communities. And so we'll start with you, Sally, and then Julie, I'd like to pop back to you for the tourism component too, and how they play a key role there.
So, to say the question again, Keegan, sorry, do you want to talk about the economic impact and like, is that where you're going?
Yeah, absolutely. So, talking more about the economic benefits that the arts play directly within our communities for both local residents and for tourism.
Okay. So, the economic impact of the arts, a lot of people say is hard to measure and not the point, right? So the purpose of arts and culture is to be inspiring, and the purpose is to generate creativity and to provide community spaces. But at the end of the day, I can say for Bravo, we are almost 99% publicly funded. We have to justify the use of public dollars to then invest and turn back around into arts and culture. So we have to measure that economic impact. And I think some of the most important measures on that certainly are dollars generated, right? Hotel motel tax is what pays Bravo's bills, and we know exactly how much money we're getting. Last year we had our best year ever, and so that's one way to measure the economic value. You can also look at overall economic impact. Bravo participated in a national study. I know there are several communities across the state of Iowa that participated, measuring the economic impact of the sector as a whole. This is looking at it more holistically. It's not just the ticket sales, but it's the ticket sales, it's the parking, it's the people that you're paying to work in the restaurants, it's the money that you're spending on your food, it's the overnight hotel stay. And I think that's a really a good picture of the broad impacts and the role that the sector plays in driving the economy. It's not just the moment in time, it's all the things that you do around the moment in time. And I think we were also really fortunate to get some additional data about the differences between residents and visitors. And Julie, I'm sure you can speak to this, but sometimes there's tension around who is this for? Is it to be bringing people in, or is it to make sure that the people that are here are benefiting and enjoying? And we were able to collect data, again, through this national study that we participated in on both the local participants and the visitors. And we know that of our non-local attendees, 67% said that they would not have come to our community if not for the arts and cultural event. It was only that reason that they came, which is pretty significant driver of tourism. They'll go someplace else. The other thing that was really striking was that about 40% of our local attendees said they would have gone somewhere else. So if we don't have these things here, not only are we not drawing the tourists, but our residents are going to take their money and they're going to spend it someplace else. So there are lots of interesting ways to measure that economic impact. And again, for us, it's often in the spirit of demonstrating the value of public funding for the arts. I don't think that's the whole answer, but I'll leave it there for now.
Absolutely. And as someone who did participate in this survey that you're talking about and going through it, both as a guest in the community and then as a business operator, it really is important. I highly encourage our guests to look up this AEP6 survey and see what the arts impact economically is in your community. So that talks about our local residents and then more of a regional tourism model. But Julie, to you, let's talk a little bit more nationally and with the tourism world
Sure.
at play.
Yes, and it is. We have to, again, create those experiences and have opportunities for those that are new to our community to experience, or they're not going to want to come here. And I just love the magic thing to me is when someone comes as a visitor, falls in love with one of our communities, and then they decide to move here. And then they move here, and then they decide to create a business here. And it just creates this beautiful cycle of, that it all starts with a visit. You come and you get connected to a community, and then it makes you want to be committed even more, either by living. I mean, I have a perfect example. I'm originally a Californian. I've lived here over 20 years. And since moving here, I mean, my parents have moved here. My brother and sister-in-law have moved here. My nephew and his wife have moved here. So they all fell in love with what we had to offer as a community as well. And it's all encompassing. It's having the arts. It's being able to go to the theater. It's being able to go visit an attraction. Tonight, several of us will be doing the cider stroll in the district and just walking and enjoying fall weather that's a little warmer than usual, but that's all right. But it's all those things. It's seeing murals when you're walking around downtown. It's experiencing something with the outdoors. And all of that is arts. Is it music? Is it, what is it? Do we see? Do we hear it? Do we feel it? It's all of those things. And it contributes to the economy, as Sally so well said. It's people going into our retail locations and supporting local business. It's buying gas at the gas station to fill up their cars when they leave. All that money comes back into our community, which is critical for our success.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I
Julia, it seemed like, yeah.
I really want to jump in on this
Go
and
for
put
it.
it in perspective in how one organization is impacted by these decisions. So building on what Julie says, it's wild to think that Mainframe didn't exist 8 years ago. And now that we are a major player in the city of Des Moines and surrounding areas of attracting visitors, we actually have 3 artists who have moved here out of state because they could get a studio at Mainframe Studios, because there's nothing like it anywhere else in terms of quality. And so it's wild to think people are relocating based on a workspace and having that and the community that's around it. But in terms of the economic impact, Mainframe hosts First Friday events, the first Friday of each month, for just 3 hours, where all of the artists open up their doors and we have music and food. And as we've measured that, we have on average now 2,300 visitors for one night during 3 hours. They're spending over $92,000 for that one First Friday, and we do that 12 times a year, which is a $1.1 million impact to not just our artists in this building, the food vendors, the musicians, but also in the local economy, as Sally has said, is spending money at restaurants, doing hotel stays, doing other shopping in the area. And that's just that night. And it's not even the indirect cost of us putting on that event and who we are working with in the community to make that happen, like printers and sign companies and all of the contract workers we hire to put on exhibitions along with those First Fridays. So those are real impacts that the arts are making in everyday lives.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you hopped in and shared that. And actually, my next question is for you, Julia. Driving right along when we talk about growth and community impact, like that First Friday event you're talking about, collaboration is a topic that regularly comes up. Can you share more about what that means to you and how it impacts the arts marketplace specifically?
Absolutely. So collaboration is key. Mainframe is still a relatively small organization. We only have 3 staff managing our building and artists and all the activities that happen here regularly. So we cannot do this alone. We have to be natural partners. And we also have to look for partners that elevate our mission, which is to have creative, affordable workspace, but also to provide equitable opportunities in the arts. And so we're looking to organizations and other groups who also have missions that we can both elevate each other's goals and really drive that mission work and advance it together. So we have nonprofits in our building already. So those are easy partnerships to have, but it's important that we're working with others, such as the Des Moines Arts Center. They are key players in being collaborators and not competitors, and thinking that the arts is actually abundance, that there's enough money, there's enough people, there's enough everything to go around. So with that mindset, we're doing a lot of sharing. We're offering events at different times so that everybody can experience the arts all times during the month, that we're not competing for certain dates, and that we're actually bringing in artists and visitors to talk between organizations and creating an actual exchange, an exchange of ideas and an exchange of resources.
Excellent. I want to pivot to something you said earlier, Julia, and see if anybody else on the panel wants to talk a little bit about it. You spoke specifically about recruiting and how artists are coming to our communities because of the opportunities that exist. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say about the topic of recruitment in general and how the arts are playing a role in driving key talent to Iowa? And any sub tangents you'd like to say on that? Looks start with you, Sally. Is there anything specific to Des Moines in your work that you find?
Yeah, well, I'm sure that the data exists. I just don't have it handy. But people really almost can work anywhere now, right? I mean, you can remote in, you can travel and go where you want to go. So again, there are statistics out there that people are actually choosing the places that they want to live first. And then they work their jobs and figure that out around that. And I don't know, but most people are probably not choosing where they want to live because they have a lot of Jimmy jobs or, whatever. Like they're thinking about what it is that they want to do and how they want to engage with their families. Or do they want to ride bikes? What do they want their life to look like? And what are the things that they want to do outside of work? And that elusive work-life balance. What does that mean in the community where you're choosing to live? And I'm sure, again, Julie can probably speak to this. I bet not an ad goes out in Cedar Rapids that doesn't include some form of public art, that doesn't include some form of cultural programming, whether it's a festival or whether it's theater tickets or an art gallery. The cultural sector is the reason why people would choose a community versus another community. And I think it's really important to recognize that there are so many layers with that, Keegan, right? So a city Des Moines size, a region Des Moines size, we don't even really talk about the city, we really talk about Central Iowa as a region. We have about 800,000 people that are in this region right now. You would expect that there would be a performing arts center and an art center and a science center and a zoo. You would expect that in a community our size. And we do, and that's amazing. I think the things though that you might not expect are really adding some really special flavor to our community and might differentiate a Des Moines from a Kansas City or from another community our size. So again, we have so many wonderful, amazing cultural festivals that are really celebrating the diversity of our population here. We have like 11 or 12 local choirs, and they all do something a little bit differently. So if you are a person who sang in high school and you want to come and be a part of that, but aren't quite sure where to start, we have so many things for you to choose from. We have local theater companies. We have a myriad of different ways for you to engage, not only as an audience member, but also as a participant. You can actually be a part of producing art in our community. Those are the reasons I think people choose a place, not just to visit, but then to stay. And again, when a corporation goes out and is recruiting, they're not saying, "Oh, we have a target." Of course you do. What they're saying is, here are the great things that are unique and special about our community. So I think that it's a huge, and I actually think this is one of the things that we universally can agree on, no matter what color shirt you're wearing, no matter what your business is, no matter what it is. I think we can all agree that arts and culture are a huge talent and workforce attractor and a really important piece of the conversation about that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Julie, I think this will tag right in with that question. So I'm really curious to hear your perspective on it as well. But looking specifically at the tourism lens for a second, when you're recruiting visitors to our community, how do the arts impact your proposal and their desire to come to Iowa?
Oh gosh, it's a major part of us selling the community because every community has great meeting space or sports facilities. We've all got that, and that's so wonderful. But what do we have past that? What, just as we've all said, what makes us unique? And it's our residents that make us unique, and it's our arts and cultural opportunities. I mean, one of my favorite stories is I had brought a group of meeting planners here that were looking to bring their groups, and I gave them a night where they all had choices. They had could go. I offered a plethora of tickets, and do you want to see community theater? Do you want to go hear live music? They could all choose, and then we all met together afterwards to share those experiences. And a couple of these planners went to our theater, Cedar Rapids, local community theater. And when we got together, the gentleman said, "Gosh, I just can't believe you got such a great touring group to come to your community." And I said, "That wasn't a touring group. That's our community theater. Those folks are all volunteers and locals." And he goes, "No, I'm talking about where I was." And I said, "I'm talking about where
Yeah.
you were." Like, I'm getting in an argument with this potential client because he would not believe that those were locals that were performing in our community theater, because he just said the level of performance was so fantastic. He would not believe that it wasn't a touring company. And I just love it. I love that we get to give those experiences and showcase that maybe we're not what outsiders think of as a big community. You know, we're not Los Angeles, we're not New York, but all of our communities in Iowa have so much to offer. And I can tell you from personal experience that visitors from outside the area love our communities, and they love our residents, and they love what they can experience with the arts, whether it's live music, theater, again, a mural. It's providing them an opportunity when a group comes in. Gosh, like, we're going to let you have dinner and a cocktail reception on stage at Paramount, or you're going to go over to the Iowa Ceramic Center and create your own art that you get to take back home with you. And now every time you look at it, you're going to think of our community and the experience you had here. So it plays a massive part in being able to sell our community.
Thank you so much. Just want to make sure I'm not cutting anybody else off here before I go to the next question. All right. Sally, I'd like to hop back here just a second. We've talked a lot about why arts councils and advocacy groups and alliances are important, right? And we've talked about the work that the arts do for our community, both from a mental place and from an economic place. But can we talk more specifically, and maybe talking about Bravo a little bit here? The work that you are doing, how is that supporting these individual arts organizations in the community? How does that work happen, and what can be done to make it even stronger?
Yeah, so not to get too nerdy about Bravo's history, but we are just about 20 years old. We celebrated our 20th anniversary. And when we were first formed, we were 100% a pass-through. Many cities were already investing in the arts in Greater Des Moines, but they were not being very efficient about it. Every single individual organization was going to every single individual community. There were a lot of meetings, it was a lot of conversations, and then each individual community was having to make a decision on how much each other agency was worth to them, and it was taking a lot of time. And Bravo was formed to be an intermediary to take those dollars and invest on behalf of the region in arts and culture. So our initial core and primary purpose, and our largest function still today, is as a funder. We collect all the funds from the cities that are investing in Bravo, and we distribute those funds. And I don't ever want to minimize how incredibly important simply passing those dollars through to the community are. Bravo works really hard to be a trust-based funder. We actually, on our grant applications, we don't ask what the organizations are going to do with the money, and we don't ask how much they want. We are able to invest based on the dollars we have available in organizations that we know are going to do good work. So I think that's the number one thing, is give the money where you can and get out of the way. I think that's a really important role and function. Julia knows far better what is needed at Mainframe than I will ever know at Mainframe. So providing that kind of support and the dollars, and then letting them use those funds for what they think is most important, is something unique about Bravo. The other thing, though, and we've come to this a little bit later in our evolution, is that there really are certain opportunities or challenges that a single grant to a single organization is not going to be able to achieve. And you touched on this a little bit, Keegan, with Julia talking about collaboration and working together, and frankly, the role of a local arts agency. If all we're here to do is take someone else's money and pass it through to somebody else, there are other ways to do that, and you miss opportunities. What we're also here to do is we're also here to listen. We try to be in dialogue. We try to hear what the organizations are struggling with. A great example of that in our community is, anecdotally, for several years, we were hearing that space, like physical space, where you put yourself, where you put your office, where you put your things, was becoming a rate limiting factor for a lot of our nonprofits. So we dug in on that, and we hired a research company, a consultant, to help us understand what really are those needs. And we produced a report so that now the whole Greater Des Moines community understands what the gaps and areas of opportunities are in terms of space for our arts nonprofits. And we continuing conversations about how to activate on what we heard. That's something Bravo is uniquely positioned to do that in the absence of Bravo, I don't think would have happened. And so then you have each individual organization doing their own thing, which works sometimes, but we're able to elevate it to a different level. And we're in different tables because of the job I do and the role I play. I'm at different tables, and I can advocate, and I can be an ambassador, and I can educate, and I can make sure that people understand things at a macro level without a dog in the fight. I don't do what you're going to do. I'm not asking you for anything. I'm simply sharing that this is something on behalf of the region. So I think there are lots of things that we're able to do. I'll end. One of the things that has turned out to be most valuable that I truly underestimated, we can just convene people. We can just get people in a room who feel so lonely. So often these leaders of these arts organizations are lonely. You're the only one doing your job. You're on a tiny little staff. You don't have people to count on, a network of support, someone to say, hey, what are you doing for health benefits? Hey, how are you handling PTO? You don't have that network. And Bravo can be a connector and a convener. And so when I hear that from somebody, I can say, hey, have you talked to this person? Or I can just set a table and invite people in and buy them a drink and let it go from there. And so I think there are a lot of powerful ways that we're providing, in addition to funding and getting out of the way, a lot of powerful things that we're doing in community as that local arts agency.
What a powerful message. Thank you. I want to ask one follow-up question specifically about Bravo's funding and how it shares back to organizations. Is there a percentage of which you are funding or that you will not fund past for an organization and its support and growth?
So that is actually a relatively complicated question. Yes, we do have target funding ranges. We use a scale that tries to apply an equity lens. So larger organizations with potentially more staff, or and for us, a larger organization, it's based on budget size. We do not think that is a perfect system, but that is the system that we have. Larger organizations are eligible for a smaller percentage of their annual operating budget from Bravo than maybe a new or an emerging organization that might need a little bit more public support to get going and to get their wheels turning and to generate the kind of capacity that they want to have. Those target funding ranges are exactly that. They're target and they're ranges. So it does kind of depend on the organization, on the entity. We do try to practice best practices in grant making to make sure that funding decisions are made independently and based on the merits of the organization. So there are a lot of layers baked into that. But I do think it's critically important to know that Bravo is probably the largest single dedicated arts funder in Central Iowa. But even for the largest gifts that we make are still only making up about 20% of an organization's annual operating budget. These organizations are hustling. They have to raise the other 80% of their annual operating support some other way. So we're really proud of the role that we play and grateful for the credit that we get, but it really belongs to the organizations and the entities who are rounding out, who are leveraging Bravo's support to generate that other 80 to 90% of their annual operating budgets from another source.
Excellent, thank you. Let's pivot directly to one of those organizations then that you guys are being able to provide that support and then is doing the legwork. Julia, with Mainframe specifically, we've talked about how you are a collective and bringing artists together, and that in the end, you're doing some of that same work on maybe a smaller scale than Bravo, but still integral to the community of figuring out who should get which grant works to be able to afford to do the work and to use spaces. Can you talk a little bit more about that journey and its evolution with your organization?
Well, we're still in our infancy. I mean, we've been around 7 years for that. And right now, we do not subsidize studios for other artists, but we do have patrons in the community who see an artist and want to provide space for them. And so they're not coming in just for a year's support. They're either putting in paying rent for 2 to 3 years for an artist to actually help them establish a foundation and really grow their artistic practice so they can then pay for their own rent those years down the line. So that's important. But Mainframe is also, we are a nonprofit. We do try to make a little bit money to help keep our building in great repair. But what we have are, artists are paying $1 a square foot, and that includes utilities each month. There is nowhere even your own housing cost and utility cost are more than $1 a square foot each month. And so we really pride ourselves in being efficient with that and being really responsible with the dollars that we have to keep rent affordable. And it comes with so many amenities. It's not just a beautiful workspace and a community of artists to work with, but it also comes with First Fridays, where we're really bringing in audiences and clients to the artist as a part of that, along with free Wi-Fi and free parking. And those are really big selling points for this, for what we're doing at Mainframe. But we couldn't do it without Bravo's support. We receive 10% of our operating dollars from Bravo, and they are our largest contributor by far, aside from our tenants who are paying rent. And I don't know how we would go about fundraising those additional dollars. That would be more time away than planning programming, and it would keep us from doing the work that's really impactful to the community.
Yeah. When you look at the work Bravo is doing, and then just in general, what your dream regional arts council and arts alliance would be, how do you see a change that would need to happen as we move and leverage into the future and think about all of the constant evolution that is coming our way?
Sure. I know Sally and I have talked about this a couple times, where right now, aside from the Iowa Arts Council, there's no one else in the state that provides individual artist funding. So I can see in the future making funding available to individual artists. I think the Charlotte Street Foundation in Kansas City does a beautiful job of that, but on a much smaller scale. But I think funding artists, they have great ideas. They have ways to transform the community in really resourceful ways. And it would be great to see them given that agency to do that rather than having to work through private business or through other nonprofits to get that funding. So I think that's important. But I also think about the barriers that are facing artists and just people in general. It's harder to put food on the table, especially artists. They're vulnerable and precarious. If you have an accident and you break your arm, can you create? And how long are you out? And then do you have income or healthcare to support you? So I think it is looking at consortiums, ways to think about, I don't want to say universal healthcare, but something that is maybe where nonprofits are banding together and getting greater deals on healthcare for their employees and how that can also help. I also think about what Minnesota's doing, especially Springboard for the Arts and guaranteed basic income artists. And so I think there's a lot of things as we think about the future. How do we start to build some of those programs or start to think about how to help everybody and to provide that kind of release valve of the pressure and those barriers that are keeping people from creating or keeping them from doing the work that they really are meant to do and want to do. And just like Sally said earlier, providing some support and getting out of the way. That would be tremendous.
Thank you. And Julie, I throw the same question to you here. I'll read it back. It's been a while since we got to the whole question here. But how do arts councils, alliances, advocacy groups, whatever we want to call them, drive the economic benefit for the arts in your community specifically? When you're thinking about Cedar Rapids, what would that perfect organization be?
Oh gosh. There, it's just collaboration. I believe as a whole, it's everybody working together and being, it's cross promoting each other, sharing ideas, getting together, and just how can we be, we're stronger together. That, being on a singular voice is fine, but when we're all together, it just raises everyone up. And I just think those community organizations are so critical to our success.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, knowing all of this, and we've talked a little bit about things changing, but I do want to focus now our conversation on the future. What are some of the hurdles that we see coming up? What are the needs? How have our needs changed? And how does that impact our goals specifically as we grow our organizations and grow this collaboration and work that needs to happen? Julia, I'll look to you. When you're thinking about the future of your organization, how does that shape together? I appreciated your conversation about the individual art grants, excuse me, but even further than that.
I think it's really exciting to dream and put that kind of wish list out there and to like speak it and hopefully manifest it. I do want to talk about some important work that is happening in the state because someone recognized a need. So the Des Moines Arts Festival and Arts Work and the Iowa Arts Council saw that artists were missing out on opportunities. And so they created the Iowa Artist Directory, where anybody can go on and post an art opportunity that's happening anywhere in the state. Artists can go on and put up their profiles, so you can actually search by artist. So if you're looking for a mural artist, you can find someone to come and do that work. And I think that is really cool idea. And so it's building on that collaboration. No organization could have done that by themselves. So, having some groups come together to form that and keep that going on is important. But I also think about, what does it mean to be a creative hub? That's the question that I'm asking every day. It's not just for Mainframe providing workspace, but we're moving into the realm of K through 12 art experiences and offering field trips and ways for kids to immerse themselves in the arts, which is showing them that there really is a career pathway in the arts, that we're also building future tenants for Mainframe, but we're building future art participants and arts patrons. And I know Sally is doing some incredible work with Passport to Culture that's supporting those very initiatives and thinking about the future. But again, what does a creative hub look like? What does that look like and feel like every day? What kind of energy do you have when you walk in a building? And are people creating together, collaborating together? Are there any barriers that are preventing them from doing that? Is transportation in place to get them there? To be together with others. And so I look at all of those different components, but what kind of workshops can we provide? How can we develop artists professionally and help them advance their careers? There's so many different programming aspects that we could provide if we had the staff and resources to do that.
Thank you. Sally, I'll go to you next with that same question. When you're looking at the future, where we are now, and the hurdles ahead.
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time thinking about the hurdles ahead. And so a couple of things. I think one, and some of this I just say, like, I don't know how that's going to end. But one I think is going to be interesting to watch is the COVID cliff coming up here in 2026 when all of the federal funding is gone. I think it will be interesting to see how those dollars were handled and whether that was CARES Act or ARPA or SVOG or whatever that was. There was a lot, like billions and billions of dollars that went into the art sector. I think it's going to be interesting to see where that lands and how sustainable that is. Whether organizations built infrastructure that is long-term and will keep them going, or whether they were relying on that funding for program support, which could be really tricky when there are no dollars left. I think another interesting funding shift that we're watching at Bravo is some of the corporate realignment with giving to the arts. At some point, and I can speak for Des Moines, at some point, like, people didn't understand why the arts mattered. And we made a lot of progress, and people were like, oh, I get it. I understand quality of life, economic impact. I get it. And we've reached a new acceleration into are the arts essential? And now we're only investing in essential things. So we went from we see your value, but we're raising the bar to we're only investing in essential things. And so now I think we're case making about why the arts are essential. And I think that's going to be an interesting journey, an interesting conversation that we'll be having with the community in broad ways. Obviously, I firmly believe that it is, and could spend a whole hour just talking about why. But I think that that's going to be a potential future barrier we need to watch, is to make sure that we are not pitting arts and culture against anything in our communities, that it's all part of what makes our communities strong and thriving. And so I think that's going to be an interesting thing. And then a third kind of trend that we're watching that I think our sector uniquely has done poorly is I think this data-driven decision making is going to be tough for the cultural sector, and having to fill out grant applications less with your qualitative people come here and they love being here, and more with I saw this many people and I changed this many lives and I can measure this many things. I used to work at the Science Center of Iowa, and one of the conversations we spent a lot of time on is how do you measure the value of a standing ovation? I don't know. I still don't know the answer to that. But as we are all being asked to be more competitive for the dollars that are available, we're gonna have to figure it out. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about from our space that are likely to be challenges or barriers for the sector moving forward. And I wish that I was here to give everybody the answers, but I don't have them.
No, but I thank you for sharing what you guys are thinking about and focusing on. It's really helpful. Julie, same question to you here. The future and the hurdles at hand.
Sure. I think the future is exciting. I think a hurdle sometimes can be community resident support. And it's so easy within our own communities to do the, oh, there's nothing to do here. And I always challenge our community that, you know what, the first thing we have to do, though, is leave our house. We've got to get up off the couch and walk out our front door and experience our amazing arts communities. And we can do that in so many ways. I mean, the most simple way is buying a ticket to something, but be a volunteer, bring your friends, share and promote what's going on, be an advocate, just being a welcoming resident when you're out and about and you run into a visitor or another community member, creating just dialogue and conversation and talking about the great things to do, because there are things to do too that don't necessarily cost money. I never want money to be a barrier to someone experiencing the arts, and that might be listening to a concert in a park that's going on for free, or again, enjoying some of the visual arts that we have that are just out in public places. There's so many opportunities, and just the challenge I give our community is leave the house, get up and out and go experience something, take a walk on the grounds of Bruce Moore, or there's so much to do and experience, and we don't even have to leave town.
Love that. We all should go take a walk in Bruce Moore. It's a wonderful thing to do. In the sculpture park in Des Moines. The list goes on and on, honestly. Okay, so we do have a question that came in from the chat real quick that I wanted to get to. What's the role of local government in these organizations, and what civic issues might arts councils need to be aware of? Now, I know we've already talked, Sally, specifically about how Bravo is funded, but how do you interact back with each of those communities that those funds come from?
Yeah, so we've sort of alluded, but just to be clear, Bravo gets 99% of our funding from 17 communities. They each put a portion of their hotel motel tax in. Those are 17 separate agreements. So the way I think of it in sort of nonprofit parlance, I basically have 17 donors. And I'm making sure that I am staying in relationships with all of those donors to make sure that they're seeing the value and understanding the role that their dollars are playing, being responsive to their needs and their questions, trying to keep them informed so that they're not only funders, but they're also advocates and ambassadors for the work that we do. One of the ways that we do that, which I wouldn't recommend or not recommend, but just as an awareness, each one of those cities has a seat on our board. That is a great way to keep elected officials informed, is by making sure they're at your table and making sure they're hearing you while you're doing the work and are part of the conversation. So that would be something that I would recommend. And I also think, elected officials face a tremendous amount of pressure. There is no way they can be experts on housing and hunger and education and potholes and police officers. Like, there's just no way that they could be good at everything. You working with elected officials, there is an incumbent responsibility on you as the partner to make sure that they are informed and to make sure that you are giving them the information that they need in order to make decisions with information. And then you kind of have to respect that they have decisions to make. And just because you give them the information doesn't mean you're going to get what you want. But we work very hard on clarity of messaging to make sure that we're providing talking points and we're making sure that they are seeing how the work that we do is deeply and directly connected to the work that they are trying to do. So if they're talking about, there's a lot of conversation about transportation in Des Moines right now. We are working really hard to make sure that our elected officials understand how decisions about transportation are affecting decisions about arts and culture and how arts and culture are playing a role in that ecosystem. So you have to help them be good at their job, because many of them are volunteers, and everyone benefits with more and better information. So that's some of the ways that we tackle that locally.
Julia and Julie, do either of you have anything you want to add on that question?
Sure. We're funded similar, where the bulk of our funding comes from hotel motel tax. So our partnership with the city is critical, and we're very thankful for what they get working with the council, working with city manager's office, the mayor. And it's just, as was stated, having that constant communication, inviting them to participate when we have groups in. We love to make them part of the welcome, or if there's some kind of networking opportunity, we love to invite them so that they can talk to the visitors one-on-one and find out what those experiences are like. And they get to hear it firsthand and share in the excitement. I always feel a little guilty that I feel like I'm the only one who gets to hear right from the visitor's mouth what the wonderful experiences that they're having. And so we like to be able to share that with when possible. But yeah, that being in constant dialogue and conversation with our city government is crucial.
Another question that came in what unique ways are arts organizations collaborating with corporate partners, and what are business leaders seeking to gain from art partnerships? Julia, I know that you, with your tourism work and bringing in these different organizations, get a lot of face time with these different business leaders. Has it led to some interesting partnerships or things that you're so grateful Cedar Rapids got to be a part of?
Oh goodness, I think of the way that when we're working with different groups or associations that are coming in, especially on a national level, having those business partnerships is critical. I'll invite a business leader from the same industry, maybe to dinner with the planner that's involved with that event, so that they can feel a connection not only to the group coming in, but the group that comes in knows how important their part of the industry is to our community. So I'm not sure if that's answering the question exactly what they were thinking, but bringing the business community in is also critical, because so many of the groups are business based that are visiting.
Absolutely. A little space there for anybody else.
Well, I think in terms of how it impacts individual arts organizations, Mainframe wouldn't exist without those corporate partners. It took $15 million of community support to buy this building, this 5-story building in downtown Des Moines, and to remodel it. and get it open. So we're now fully occupied. And that's a lot of support. That was a lot of belief in an idea. And now that we're here, we're saying this idea is totally working. It was a really good investment, but I'm sure it was a risky decision to invest large sums of money. But there was a way. They did see the idea of critical mass of the number of artists in one building and what that could potentially do. And I think we're already demonstrating those efforts. But then even on a day-to-day, like we are working with individual corporations and small businesses and firms, and we're offering workshops. We have artists here who deliver kind of team building experiences for coworkers at these businesses. And I think that's something really incredible. So they were able to put in that initial phase, in the fundraising phase, and now benefiting in other ways that impact their employees directly. And I think that's a really cool idea.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you shared that. So that takes us to our last question of the session here today. At the end of the day, what do you want Iowans to remember about this topic and where we're at with arts alliances, councils, advocacy groups? And Sally, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that there isn't a formal structure, right? So if you're waiting for your community to get a local arts agency or an arts council or something before you do something, don't do that. Just go ahead and get engaged. It doesn't, there's not a clear definition or a box that you have to check before you can get started. Attend, buy a ticket, advocate, make a donation, volunteer, do something. Don't wait for your community to figure it out completely. And always remember at the center of those decisions that you're making that art is essential and it depends on everyone. It is truly an ecosystem, and there's no single entity or single individual that can take care of it. So every single person on this call, every single person in the state of Iowa, whether you're a donor, whether you have never taken an art class or don't really like it or don't think that you like it, try something, get out there, do it. But it's essential to the success of our communities and to the vibrancy of our state that you get involved.
Absolutely. Thank you. Julie, same to you. At the end of the day, what do you want Iowans to remember?
Gosh, Sally said it so well, and it's get involved. And even if it means, again, taking a walk in the grounds of somewhere in your community, or going and listening to live music, or participating in a class, or going to a culinary arts experience, whatever it is, just go experience something.
Absolutely. Julie, one of the things you said when we were prepping for this conversation is art isn't just the music that we hear when we go to a show or the theater that we see, it's everything that's around us. And I just love what you shared there. And I thought I needed to add that little chunk from what you said earlier. So that was beautiful. Julia, same question to you.
Sure. Well, of course, invest in the arts, but it is that important reminder that you have choice on who you work with. You have choice on where and how you spend your dollars. And those dollars reflect your values, right? So if you really are invested in the arts, choose a partner in the arts to help you with your work. If you're in the corporate world or you're an independent small business, but also think about when you go places, can you have a jeweler make your jewelry, make a special ring for you instead of going to a box store? That there's so many ways that those dollars can impact real people in your communities making that living. But think about the choices that you make. And like others have said, put artists and arts organization leaders at the table. Bring them in at the beginning of conversations and think about how the arts can be embedded from the beginning to plan cool projects, new things happening in cities, new project development, because you're going to get an awesome result rather than thinking about the arts as that addition, as that kind of dollop of whipped cream on top, something you add at the end. Bring them into the beginning and give them a seat and a voice.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Julia. What a wonderful statement. Thank you so much. A couple of quick thank yous here today. We'd like to thank Eric, who's been managing the tech on this session so gratefully. We'd like to thank the Gazette staff for bringing this group of people together, both panelists and guests alike. As Sally so wonderfully said earlier, a lot of this is about making space and bringing people to a table to talk. And we got to do that today. We got to share a lot of ideas about how we can move forward and make sure that Iowa is the best opportunity for artists and its residents possible. So thank you, the Gazette, for making that happen. Thank you to the sponsors of Iowa Ideas 2024. And thank you to the people that showed up to listen. Without you, there's no point in doing this. So thanks for being here. Please make sure you attend the other sessions today and the keynote, and check back next year for Iowa Ideas 2025. Thanks so much and have a wonderful day, everybody.